What's going on, guys? Easy Red High here, about to show off my For Hire deck profile. I really enjoy the For Hire archetype, mostly for their names. It's pretty, For Hire is pretty funny, you know, pretty punny on Konami's part. Probably my favorite name since Totally Awesome, which I know. But let's just hop right into it. So for the main deck, starting off, we of course are running 3 Beats. Probably the most important small monster in the deck, level 4 or lower. All the tiny For Hires have an ability to special summon 1 For Hire from your hand once per turn besides themselves. And all the smaller ones, again, 4 or lower, all have an ability that activates when you special summon a For Hire monster. So Beats is to search out any For Hire from your deck and add it to your hand, which is extremely useful. He's your searcher, your Stratos. And probably one of my favorite cards in the deck as well. I love the art. Just a little furry rabbit guy. It's another reason why I absolutely adore this deck, is because when I beat you with it, I'll be beating you with a deck of furries, and nobody likes that. So 3 Beats. And then next up, I got 3 Dampas, and I played him at 2 for a while, but his second ability, when any For Hire special summon to your field, you can target one face-up card on the field and destroy it. And I just had found that 3 was a better number for me than 2 for pulling him, because a lot of the times I will sacrifice early in the game For Hires to make Link monsters or Xyz and kind of, you know, get rid of them. But I just found that a couple times I had ran out of the 2, I had used them for whatever reason, and there's a lot of recovery in this deck, but I just couldn't bring him back, so I decided to take out Helmer, I believe. You'll find that he is the only For Hire of the archetype that I don't have in my deck. He just wasn't very useful. I kept bricking with him whenever I would draw him. I believe, when a For Hire is special summoned, you discard a card, and then you can draw 1 card, which isn't always that great. But you have to discard 1 For Hire card, I believe. Either way, he wasn't in the deck, so 3 Dampas. Next is 2 Recons, Scout For Hire. He's at 2, as Dampa was, but I feel at 2 he's at a good spot. His secondary ability is to destroy 1 set card when a For Hire is summoned, and I don't find me using him nearly as often as I use Dampa, but Recon is still extremely good to have to get rid of, you know, problematic back rows before they pop them. 2 Recons. Next up is 3 Seals, which I've seen online some people run 2. I totally get it. The way I built my For Hire deck was tons of recovery, as you'll see, and Seals Strategist For Hire's secondary ability, when a For Hire is special summoned, he gets, you can add 1 For Hire from your graveyard to your hand, which is not pure recovery, but, you know, it lets me add any For Hire back to my hand, and since they all can special summon each other, it usually gives me, I can just special summon him right after adding him to my hand, which really helps his deck. Storm capabilities, I run 3 because I usually do like to have 1 of him on the board, just to bring anything back that I link away or gets destroyed. So 3 Seals. Next up is 3 Bravos, Fighter For Hire. He's the strongest under level 4 monster. 1900 attack is a pretty good beater. His secondary ability is whenever a For Hire is special summoned, all For Hire monsters you control gain 500 attack. I would definitely keep him at 3. The strongest monster in the deck is Raphael, and his attack is at 2800. So getting Bravo on board to boost him up past 3000, Raphael, that is pretty helpful to get over problematic big boss monsters and the like. So 3 Bravos. Wolverine Lizard, you know, okay, interesting. Okay, next up we are going into the bigger For Hires, the level 5s and up, and all of these have a different first ability than the smaller For Hires. Smaller For Hires, like I've been saying, special summon any For Hire besides themselves once per turn. And all of these have a first ability that activates when they are special summoned, and a secondary ability that is pretty varied. So I run 3 Raphael, probably my favorite card in the deck. I think I said that about Beat, but he's just the strongest card in the deck, and he's a pretty angry dragon guy, which is pretty nice. And his effect is super useful. I constantly, whenever I play Beat and special something else, I usually search for fail straight out of my deck and play him immediately. He lets you excavate the top cards of your deck equal to the number of for hire monsters you have. So usually I try to build like a 4 for hire board, drop or fail, excavate 4, and then you can add any of those cards to your hand. It doesn't just have to be a for hire, which is extremely useful. He helps the draw power of the deck for sure, and he is the strongest of them. He has a second ability, which is when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can discard 1 card for hire, negate the activation. You can only use that effect once per turn, which is pretty upsetting because it doesn't destroy the card, but he does give you a way to get around some small problems. So 3 refails for sure. I run next 2 Dyna, Hero for hire. He's also pretty strong, 2500 attack. His first ability is when he's special summoned, you can banish cards from your opponent's graveyard up to the number of for hire monsters with different names you have on the field, which I had him at 1 for a while, but so many decks I play have so much to do with the graveyard that dropping him first turn instead of refail to draw just to banish some cards that they've have in their graveyard, you know, they plan on bringing back, has been really helpful. He takes a few of my opponents by surprise, so I run him at 2. And his secondary ability reads that you cannot target monsters monsters your opponent control cannot target monsters for hire you control for attack except him, which is also proved pretty helpful. It can protect my Beat if I have him on board, so next turn I can, you know, get another search out because you have to get rid of Dyna first. And yep, 2 Dynas. Next up are the last 2 monsters I run, which are 2 one-of, which is Wiz, Sage for hire, and Sagitta, Maverick for hire. They both have more or less the opposite first abilities. When Wiz is special summoned, you gain 500 life points for each monster for hire you control with a different name, except Wiz. And Sagitta, when she is special summoned, if this card is special summoned, you can inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each for hire monster you control with a different name, except Sagitta. So this is just used for some quick damage and some quick life gain. Since I can search them out with Beat, I only have 1 in my deck. I play them very rarely, only when I need them. If my opponent has a problematic board and I just need to deal him a quick 2,000, you know, I can fill up my board pretty quickly with this deck, and then I just drop Sagitta 2,000 to you. I've used it to win games quite a few times. And Wiz, more for life gain. I use Wiz considerably less. I search for Wiz considerably less, but I still feel she has a place in the deck in case I'm ever running pretty low and need to replenish some of my life points. Wiz's second ability is when your opponent activates a spell or trap card, quick effect, you can discard 1 for hire, negate the activation, which is like Raphael's ability, except for spells and traps. It still does not destroy the card that you negate, which is upsetting. And then Sagitta's is when your opponent cannot target monsters for hire you control with a card except this one, which is like Bravo's, except this is for abilities and cards, not just attacks, which is also pretty useful. I use Sagitta considerably more than Wiz. So those are my last 2 monsters in the deck. All right, moving on to the spells. I said that this deck has a lot of recovery in it because a lot of... You can activate, and all the for hire abilities are once per turn, but that can activate during your opponent's turn as well. So I have several cards to bring my monsters back on my opponent's turn so I can get their abilities twice. Search off Beat on my turn, you know, have something in my graveyard, use, say, Mayhem for hire to bring it back on my opponent's turn and get the search effect off again. As I'm going through this deck, I should have said this in the beginning, I don't play very competitively. Me and my friends play casually, so you won't find any Ash Blossoms, Drolls, any cards that are too crazy amount of money in these decks. I play just for fun. So, yeah. Anyway, so 3 Mayhem for hires. This lets you... It's a monster reborn for hires. Target 1 for hire monster in your graveyard. Special summon it in defense position. You can activate 1 per turn. But it's nice because it's a quick play. So set it, activate it on your opponent's turn. Like I said, get any of the for hires abilities again. Super solid card in my opinion. I definitely would keep it at 3. Next up is I have 2 trade-ins in this deck because sometimes I find that you summon monsters so frequently that you run out of a hand. So Raphael being 8 stars, and like I said, I pretty much always will search for Raphael first off Beat's ability. So I'll always have a Rafael in hand, and if I draw a trade-in, drop Rafael, trade-in, draw 2, and then, like I've been saying, with all the recovery in this deck, it's very easy to bring him back. So 2 trade-ins. I think 2 is a good number. I wouldn't go any less or any more. And then I have a bunch of 1-ofs. We have 1 Soul Charge, because why not, I suppose. Any deck, Swarms, Fields, or most decks in general could really benefit from this. So 1 Soul Charge. 1 Desires, and I had it at 2 for a while, but I do have a lot of single cards in this deck, mostly because I play casually. And with Desires, I found that I would banish some single cards that I would need, some of my traps, some of the other spells, possibly even Sagitta if I needed to deal some damage. So I narrowed it down to 1, and with trade-ins, Rafael's ability to excavate, I have enough draw power, I believe, but 1 has proved me helpful. 1 Desires. 1 Dark Hole, just to clear boards. Like I've been saying with all the recovery, I can, you know, destroy everything and still bring some things back and keep my plays going. 1 Monster Reborn, of course. Like I've been talking constantly about this recovery. If I could play more, of course I would. 1 Reborn. 1 Reinforcement of the Army, which also if I could play more, I would. This is strictly for Beat, who's a warrior, as you guys can see. And he, like I've said, is probably the most important card in this deck, period. So every one of my first turns I play with this deck, I always want to get him out. So that's why I have 1 Reinforcement. Helps thin the deck a little bit, even if you do, you know, have 1 on the field. All right, those were the spells. Moving on to the traps. We have a Training for Hire for all your training needs. Double the fur in this card. So I've seen some decks talk about running 1 or 2 of these. I find 1 is enough. Its ability reads, if face-up monsters for hire you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can target one of those monsters whose level, special summon 1 monster for hire from your deck whose level is lower than the target's original level. You can only use this effect once per turn. Yeah, when I draw it and use it, it is pretty helpful, but when I don't really notice it's gone. Very, very pretty secret rare card. But I run 1 just to kind of keep up with the for hire archetype. I would have put their their field card in here, Fandora, the Flying Furtress, I believe it's called, but it had no purpose in this deck at all. So, yep, 1 Training for Hire. Next, I run 2. There can be only 1. I say there can only be 1 every time, even when I play this card. This card I run because every single card in this deck, save for Recon and Dampa, which are both the 2 pop 1 face-up card, pop 1 set card, are both beasts, as you can see, and they're the only 2 monsters with the same attribute in this deck, same typing in this deck. So there could be only 1 really does help because it doesn't really hinder my deck at all. And it really messes up a lot of decks I've played against. With single archetypes, dragons, magicians, you know. I was thinking about possibly putting this at 3 to make sure I always have 1. But I've had no problems with it at 2. So 2, there can be only 1. Next, to go with the recovery theme, is 3 Back to the Fronts, which I solely have in here because they're traps. I can activate them on my opponent's turn and bring back the hires to reactivate their abilities. I've had pretty good luck with Back to the Front. It hasn't really ever done me bad. I've never had like a full hand of recovery and no monsters. You know, all the recovery in this deck always really helps me move forward with the deck. So 3 Back to the Fronts. And then I have 1 Solemn Warning and 1 Solemn Strike. I only run them at 1 because I feel everything else in my deck needs to be there. At the moment, I only have 1 spare Solemn Strike. But yeah, just negation. Usually I hope to get them early on to stop my opponent while I keep building. So 2 Solemns, and for the last card of the main deck, I have a Mirror Force. A lot of people are going to be asking me, why do you run Mirror Force? And Mirror Force just always has a place in my heart, and you'll find usually 1 of them in all my decks. I enjoy it. If I did take a card out to add another Solemn Strike, it would be Mirror Force. But for now, I like to leave it in. All right, so that was the main deck. And now we are going to move on to my extra deck. So for Link Monsters, I run one Saruja, which is probably the most expensive card I own. And I got him solely for, it's a Link 4, you know, I'm sure everybody knows what he does at this point. His ability to fix your hand is super helpful, and getting 4 monsters on the board with different names isn't really a problem at all with this deck. They all special summon each other. First turn I can have, you know, a full board. Saruya really comes in handy. I wish he was at 3,000. I wish he was a little stronger, honestly, because he's at the same strength as Raphael, but and Raphael with the power boost will get over things anyway. So one Saruja. I play one Borrelguard Dragon, mostly because I don't have a Borreload or a Borrel Sword, and I wanted another stronger Link 4 monster, and a monster that's actual attack is 3,000. So yeah, I put Borrelguard. I happen to pull him in a pack, so that's why he's in there. I also run one Decode Talker, because, you know, Decode Talker is the man. And also getting, like I've been saying with all the Link monsters, getting 3 monsters on the board really isn't too hard. And then he gives you some nice negates to protect your stuff. Then I run one Nightmare Phoenix and 2 Nightmare Cerberuses. I might take out a Cerberus for another Nightmare Phoenix. And the reason I have these is because with this deck, I found that I fill up my board pretty quickly. And sometimes I max it out and I don't have a way to get more monsters in play to activate their effects to keep my game going. So I have these in here kind of just to get rid of monsters. 2 monsters, you know, put them in the Link Zone, they'll have 2 free spots to keep going with my special summons. And then, you know, Phoenix lets me get rid of spells and traps, and he lets me get rid of monsters. So they are doubly helpful. So those are the Link monsters. Next are my Xyz. I run one Baguska. Sometimes this deck does perform a little slowly, so if I can get some monsters out to throw Baguska down and just slow the game down a little bit, I can. One Baguska. One Castel. One Tornado Dragon. One Diamond Direwolves. And one Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon. And all these are just for, you know, all their effects, just for some utility, just in case I need to get rid of something, do some extra damage, etc., etc. I also run one number 64, Ronin Raccoon Sendayu. He's a pretty helpful card. He's 2 rank 2, oh my god, 2 level 2 beasts, which, like I said before, Donpa and Recon are. So it's pretty easy to make him, and then he creates a token that copies the strongest monster on the field. So if you're having trouble getting past something, you can just throw him down, copy it, and use them to destroy each other. Also, a very helpful ability is he can't be destroyed while you control another beast type. So the token is then a beast and kind of keeps him alive, which keeps you alive, you know, if your strongest monsters have the same attack. So one of him. I was thinking possibly taking out one of the last 4 cards I showed you and putting in another one, but at 1, I don't go to him every game, but at 1, I haven't found too much. And these next cards all serve a specific purpose. 1 Gaga Cowboy and 2 number 47 Nightmare Sharks. Like I've been saying with this deck, none of the strongest monster is 2800. Is Raphael at 2800, and if you use Bravo's ability to boost all for hire's attack by 500, he becomes 33, excuse me. But even then, your cards aren't that strong, so I've gone up against stronger boards that I couldn't really get through at all. I didn't have any of the Donpas to pop face-up cards or anything, but rare occasions. But I've used Nightmare Shark considerably more than Gaga, but either way, they both deal direct damage. Summon him, put him in defense position, remove a card, deal 800 to them. And number 47, you remove one of your materials, and then a water monster can attack directly, meaning he can. So that's 2,000 direct damage to your opponent. And I've actually used them both at the same time before under an Xyz, a Link monster in a game to deal 2,800, and they were at like 26. So just to get the last damage off. Getting a 2 level 3s, which is beat. He's searchable off reinforcements of the army, so he's pretty helpful. Is there another level 3 in this deck? I don't think so. So sometimes it's tough, but I mean, you play one, revive one that died already, all the recovery in this deck, it's really not a problem. So number 47 is probably my most used Xyz in this deck. But yeah, that was pretty much the deck profile for you guys. I hope you liked it. Like I said, I don't really play competitively, so I don't really have a side deck. If I did, I wouldn't even know what to tell you to put in it. But yeah, that was it. Should be having some more deck profiles coming soon. If you guys liked it, drop a like below and comment if you got anything to say. Thanks a lot and have a good day.